I found out he was cheating on me. I wanted to leave. I didn't know what to do. What do you do? An escape from the home of her ex and his mother. I have text messages. She was threatening to sell my stuff. She was threatening because you wouldn't pay for it. Don't shout out. And her mom says she's on her own. She calls you and tells you she's in an abusive relationship. You didn't say to her, come home. No. Why? Judge Judy, you are about to enter the courtroom of Judge Judith Scheindlin. This is Judge Judy. 21-year-old Cassandra Weber is suing her ex-boyfriend. 22-year-old Nathan Hofstadter and his mother Delora for destruction of property and the return of her belongings. Order. All rise. This is case number 73 on the calendar in the matter of Weber versus Hofstadter. Thank you. You're welcome, Judge. Parties have been sworn in. You may be seated. Folks, have a seat. Could you get that stuff off the table? Please. How old are you, Miss Weber? 21. How long did you live with Mr. Hofstadter and his mother? I lived with Nathan for the 2.5 years we were together, and I lived with him and his mother and his father for, I'd say, a good year. No. Okay. So you were with Nathan for 2.5 years, and you lived together until you were how old? That's what? Where? We moved into an apartment together, and then after that we decided that he was out of a job. So we moved in with his parents. What about you? Did you have a job? I did have a job. Yes. So he had no job. Yes. The lease had ended, and so we decided, okay. So the lease ended. Yes. And he couldn't afford his half. So we decided that we would move in with his parents, and we lived with them for, I'd say, a good 6 or 7 months. And then we got a house with a couple of roommates, and we lived there for, I'd say, 3 months. And then we broke the lease because the roommates couldn't hold up their end of the deal as well with him. And so we had moved in with his parents for, I'd say, a good 2 months. And then we moved to Iowa for 3. And then we came back and lived with them for about another month. And then we had broken up. So I moved out. I got the dates right here. If you annoy me again, I'm just going to throw you out. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am. In the time that you lived with Mrs. Hofstadter, were you working? I was. Yes. Did you pay rent? I did not. So for the year that you lived with her, you were working? Yes. And not paying rent? Yes. Now, when you went to Iowa and came back, before you went to Iowa, who were you working for? IHOP as a waitress? Full-time or part-time? Full-time. And what did you do in Iowa? We had moved there because Nathan got a job opportunity working for Polaris. And so we went down there so that he could, see how it would go and see if we maybe wanted to move down there together. And it didn't work out. So we moved back. And then where did you work? I came back to IHOP as soon as I came back. I got my job back. And what happened to the job in Iowa? She didn't like it over there. So I decided to move back because she didn't like it. Yeah. Well, tell me about that conversation. You had a job there. Yeah. I was working at Polaris. We were there in July of last year. And then in October, the end of October, she told me that she didn't like it because she didn't have a good job. And I was making pretty good money and she got upset about it. And so she wanted to move back and go back to IHOP. And so, okay, is that why you moved back? Yeah. I didn't have, is there a yes or a no? Yes, I did. So he's told me an accurate story. Now, this is what the case is about. You each have lots of things that you think that the other owes the other. You claim he destroyed your property. He says you destroyed his property. You say you didn't get all your property back from his mother, that she didn't give you back all the stuff that was in storage. They say you never paid any rent, that you never paid back loans. It all sounds like a lot of hogwash to me. So I'm going to give you all about 3 minutes to tell me your side of the story. But I will direct the questions. First of all, the day you separated. What month, day, and year was that? It was, I'd say, March 12th. Approximately, is that correct? No, it was actually Easter, March 28th. Does that sound right? I think it was a little bit before that. It was 2 days before my birthday. And you're positive. Yep, you're not positive. No, I am. I know exactly when I left because I wanted to leave. It was March 12th. Yep. Okay. Do we have any sort of police report? Yep. I actually have 2 of them. Just a second. Give me the date of the first one. April 20th. April 20th. Yes. Now I'd like to take a look at it. Okay. That's the date of the first one. Yes. Well, could you explain to me why? If this happened on March the 12th, that the date of this report was the 20th of April. That was the report that I had taken to the court because I wanted to have him held responsible for what he did to my property. All I want to know is the incident that you described where he cut up your clothes was the date that you separated. That's what you described to me in your complaint, right? He says that that was the same date that you destroyed his Xbox or PlayStation. That is not true. PlayStation. That's not true. But what I'm asking you is if he cut up your clothes March 12th. No, he cut up my clothes in the beginning of April or I'm sorry. Yes, the beginning of March. The very first time where we had broken up. I found out he was cheating on me. I wanted to leave. He didn't want me to leave. So I had a bag of clothes and he ripped them out of my hand, threw them on the ground. Did you stay after that? No, I left after that. I grabbed my bag and I left. So why did it take you from March 12th when you left until April 20th? Because I was scared and they would not let me have my stuff. I was scared of what they were going to do to it. I have text messages. She was threatening to sell my stuff. She was threatening to get rid of it. And I was scared of him. I didn't know what he was going to do. You weren't scared. That's a lot of, well, I wasn't once I left. Listen to me. You weren't scared of him at all. No, listen to me. Don't shout out. Oh, I didn't mean to. Well, I know you didn't mean to. If you do it again, I'm going to throw you out. Okay, sorry. You weren't scared of him at all. I was very scared. Lots of people he has police reports against him and his father. You just told me not really. You want me to play back the tape. You left on March 12th. Because he was very convincing at trying to make me think differently. He was very convincing. Listen, I don't go for dramatics. Where did you go when you left on March 12th? I went to my friend's house and I stayed there for a week. And then where did you go? And then I went to my parents' house. And I went to a friend's house for a week. Yes, totally separate. Yep. And then not yep. Yes is the answer. And then after a week, did you tell your mother where you were? She knew where I was. Don't tell me what she knew. I asked you a question. I said, when you left the Hofstetter house, did you tell your mother that you were going to a friend's house? Yes, I did. And what was the friend's name where she was staying? Mariah. Okay. And you were happy with that? Yes. Okay. You didn't say to her, come home. No. Why? Because she's an adult and lives on her own. What kind of a response is that from a parent? She calls you and tells you she's in an abusive relationship, which is what she tells the police. A month and a half later, came to the desk to report about 6 months' worth of domestic abuse. So she tells you that she's left an abusive relationship and you say to her, you can't come home. You're an adult. I never told her she couldn't come home. I didn't speak. She did not want to move home with her parents. I was embarrassed. And even if I didn't report it, I still feel like I should not be held responsible for the things of mine that he ruined. I don't at all. Listen to me. I don't mind you coming and saying to a court, we broke up. We had a nasty breakup. He cut up my clothes. I did a little damage too, but now they have things that they haven't returned to me. This is the list of things that I have. I don't mind that. That's reasonable. Making up a lot of baloney is not. Judge Judy continues in a moment. In the 2.5 years that you'd lived with him, in his parents' house for a year, in Iowa where he had a job, all of these things don't suggest to me somebody who should be going in to report domestic abuse because they want their property back. And later today, did you write her name? Yes, I did. You forged her name, as she requested. Yes, I did. Or it was on its face. You forged her name and wrote the check payable to your account. Yes, ma'am. Real cases. Real people. Judge Judy. Cassandra Weber's ex-boyfriend, Nathan Hofstadter, and his mother, Delora, owe for destruction of property and the return of belongings. The defendants are countersuing for rent, storage fees, money loaned, and an assault. Now, you lived with him for 2.5 years. In the 2.5 years that you lived with him, in his parents' house for a year, in Iowa where he had a job, and you didn't like it, so he moved back, which you acknowledged before. All of these things don't suggest to me somebody who should be going into the police station to report domestic abuse because they want their property back. Do you understand? Yes, I do. But I was scared. The whole time. He didn't show all of these crazy things that he was doing. It happened when we broke up. I got some of my stuff that day in April. She was throwing it out on the porch. I grabbed what I could because that was not allowed in the house. I called the cops in this police report because I wanted my things. What date is that police report? I believe. Actually, that is the one that you have. That's 6 weeks late. That's from March 12th to April 20th. Where were you? I was dealing with the trauma that I went through. I didn't know what to do. What do you do? Just a second. Do you have any property that belongs to her? No, there is none. Just a second. There was a storage unit at some point. Did there come a time when the plaintiff came to the storage unit? Okay. On what date did you go to the storage unit? On April 20th. Did you meet Missy Hofstetter at the storage unit? I did. Yes. Did Miss Hofstetter open the storage unit? Yes, she did. Did you remove any property? I did. And ma'am, if I may, I'm not really concerned about the storage unit. I did get most of my belongings out of there, but I have text messages from her stating that things that were still in the storage unit, and then I have text messages of her admitting what is still at her house that belongs to me. Just a second. I would like to see a text message of her admitting that she has property of yours in her house. Okay, Miss Hofstetter, listen to me. Be very careful. Do you have any property that belongs to the plaintiff in your house? I got none in my house. Don't play games in your garage, in a shed, in a basement. You have stuff, some underwear, some socks. I got a pair of yoga pants. But what she's claiming that we have is her baseball glove, her Uggs, baseball shoes. Yep, Nike. Mit. An Uggs. Is that what you're claiming? Yes. Do you have it? No. Ma'am, they don't have it. Now, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to tell me. Ma'am, if I may say something, I didn't get to tell you about the damage to my car. I have estimates. Just a second. Okay. I just want to make sure. So far, I'm unimpressed with you. I mean, you live in this lady's house for a year. You don't pay any rent. She never asked. There was 11 people living in that house at one point. Did they pay rent? They didn't pay rent. You never asked. Did you pay rent? Listen to me. You live there as an adult. Don't answer me back. You didn't pay any rent. And this whole gushetta of what was in a storage unit was in the house. The three things that you're wasting my time with are a baseball bat. That's not what's important to me. What's important to me is my car. Well, then, why don't you just say it's my car? That's what I was trying to say. No, you started with a whole bunch of other things. I would rather have started with this. With a police report that says domestic abuse. Well, this is domestic abuse. What he did to my car. I have estimates. I have estimates for just to replace the damage to my car. This case is over. We're done. Ma'am, what about him being held responsible for his damage? Why is there an excuse when they step out? She's upset that we broke up. I hope one day he's held responsible for the things that he did to me. Don't ever get with the blonde with blue eyes. You won't have an issue. I hope that every girl out there does know what they deserve and that they don't give somebody like him a chance. And now the next case. All parties in the matter. Francisco versus Vetter. Step forward. Megan Francisco is suing her former friend, Elizabeth Vetter, for falsely accusing her of illegally depositing a check. Mentiem, Francisco. You and the defendant were friends. And based upon what I read, you were also in the military together. That's how you met. When you were no longer in the military, you became roommates. And while you were roommates, you had to go to jail for a period of time for what? DWI, ma'am? Now, at that time, you were roommates. Yes, ma'am. And according to you, Miss Vetter told you that while she was going to be in jail, you should take her disability check. You were getting disability for some reason. Yes, I hurt myself at work, so I was waiting for a disability check and use that disability check to pay her portion of the rent. Yes, ma'am. According to you, you did that. And then you gave the rest of the money to her when she was released. Then what happened? Miss Vetter is released from jail and she's going over her finances and she sees that she's missing a disability check. She contacts her employer who contacts disability and says that the check was cashed by you. So she notified your bank that it was a fraudulent transfer of money and they removed the money from your bank. So your lawsuit against her is for falsely reporting that you had fraudulently cashed the check. Am I correct? Yes. Ma'am, Judge Judy continues in a moment. You paid September's rent and you paid October's rent. Did you return they do it to her? Yes, I did. Ma'am. And Stephen Brooks is a witness. I'm glad he wasn't a witness to give you the $1. Yisoa? I don't believe a word you said. Real cases. Real people. Judge Judy. Megan Francisco says former friend Elizabeth Vetter falsely accused her of illegally depositing a check. On what date did you receive this check? I deposited the bank into my account on 7/13 of 2015. I have the evidence here. Who endorsed the check? I wrote page of the order of and wrote my name. And then, no. Did you write her name? Yes, I did. So you forged her name, as she requested? Yes, I did. Ma'am, my witness. My friend Stephen Brooks was there when I had the call from her, when she was in jail telling me to cash the check. Well, it was on its face. You forged her name and wrote the check payable to your account. Yes, ma'am. On what date did you go to jail? I was arrested on, I believe it was the July 10th. Had you paid July's rent? No. And my rent was due on the 10th, and I was waiting on this check. It was supposed to come the next day. And on what day were you released from jail? The July 14th. Ma'am, were you sober when you were arrested? No. Ma'am, when did you sober up? Probably the moment I got to the jail. Now, when you called Mrs. Francisco. What did you tell her to do about your rent that was due on the 10th? I actually didn't call Ms. Francisco. I called another friend of mine that I actually had the number of, and I said, hey, will you let her know that I'm in jail? I'm going to be here. I don't recall saying have her cash my check. That wasn't something that I recall saying, but I just had my friend tell her that I was in jail so that I couldn't. Well, how was she supposed to cover your part of the rent? And how much was your part of the rent? It was like $400. When you got out of jail on the 14th, where did you go to live? I went back to where I was living with Megan. Until when? I moved out November 1st. Okay. So you lived there in July and August and September. I would like to see proof that you paid July's rent, August's rent, September and October's rent. Do you understand what I just said? I do understand. I want to see proof that you paid July's because what this case is about is she said she paid your part of July's rent because you couldn't pay it because you were in jail, and she paid it out of this check, which you authorized her to cash. Now, if that's not the case, then the first thing you would have done when you came out is paid July's rent. Correct? Proof. Since we were friends. We didn't unless she kept record of. I just gave her money when I had rent, and it wasn't like we've made receipts. We were friends. So now you're out in July and you're sober. Yes. So you knew July's rent was due. So you had to have a conversation with her about July's rent. I didn't because she had paid it with a disability check. Then you knew she paid it with a disability check. But it wasn't $1,400. How much was it? $400. And how much was the disability check? $1,400. Fine. So now we're talking about $1,000. Yes, ma'am. So now you agree that it was your understanding that she paid your rent from the disability check for July? Yes, ma'am. Something that you didn't acknowledge in your answer. Acknowledge that she paid from your disability check that she had to have cashed. Illegally. My question to you is why did you continue to live with her? So you knew she cashed the check in July. You knew she paid the rent in July. You knew the check was for $1,400 in July, right? You continued to live with her in August. Did you pay August's rent? Yes. Ma'am, you didn't say to her, well, eat up the amount that was over from my disability check. You paid September's rent? Yes. Ma'am. And you paid October's rent, even though you thought that she stole $1,000 from you. So if I told her to go rob a bank and she did it, it would be okay. Did you return the $1,000 to her? Yes, I did. Ma'am, and Stephen Brooks is a witness. He actually wasn't. I'm glad he wasn't a witness to her giving you the $1,000. I don't believe a word you said. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Yeah, goodbye. Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $1,000. Judge Judy continues in a moment. And on the next Judge Judy, it was pretty much open and shut, so I'm pleased with it. She illegally signed and cashed my check and cashed it, and acted like it was no big deal. I told her she was going to do all this. If the tables were turned, she would have pressed charges right away. The judge just blasted her right on national television because they need money for more important things. Money is the root of all evil.